David's sharing a special guitar with us. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Check out this really cool case. It almost has like a paisley fabric exterior to it. That's quite fancy. And then you've got like the leather-bound edges. The whole black, brown, and cream thing is looking good, especially with the gold hardware. And of course, you have a matching handle. But now the question remains, what kind of guitar sleeps in a fancy case like this? It's a PRS Wood Library model. So we're going to learn about the 594 model, what on earth Wood Library even means, and what specs this particular one has. So first off, let's tackle the name, McCarty 594. The 594 portion actually describes its scale length, 24.594. And the reasoning behind that is, here's the big shocker. Most Gibsons are not actually 24 3/4 like they're advertised. If you actually measure them from the edge of the nut, they are slightly short. For my show, I always take the measurement from about halfway through the nut because that's when it lines up. I always thought it was strange that Fender took it from the edge of the nut and almost every other manufacturer, but not Gibson. But when Paul first started designing his guitars and starting his company, all that good stuff, he was heavily inspired by the Gibson double cut shape. And in researching guitars, he kept seeing this guy, Ted McCarty's name on all the patents. Ted, he was actually the president of Gibson from 1950 through 1966. Something to know about that is Gibson's golden era period when all the famous popular stuff came out. You're talking the Les Paul, the SG, the Firebird, the ES style instruments. The things we think of as classic rock instruments have his name on the patents. Now Ted's real name is Theodore. Gibson came out with something called the Theodore. Yeah, they're talking about that guy. That was another one of his archive designs that wasn't supposed to see the light of day. So sometime in the late 80s, early 90s, Paul reached out to McCarty and kind of took on a mentorship, I guess you could say. And then in 1994, the first McCarty model was introduced. Now today we have a few different versions. There's the single cut, the traditional PRS double cut, and then they have a cool semi-hollow version, which at this point, if you like my flavor of show, I actually do have documentations of each, including the Import SE model that came out last year. So needless to say, there are quite a few of these guitars out there. They're not necessarily rare. However, this is a special edition. It's known as a Wood Library. But to talk about that, we need to talk about how PRS grades their things. For example, Gibson has their Epiphone division as their import models. Then they have cheaper Gibson USA offerings as well as slightly more expensive. And then you step into the custom shop, or you can travel into like the Murphy Labs to get aging on a custom shop guitar, or the collector's editions. And then if you want to get really crazy, you can go to the Crimson division for special pieces that have the intricate ornate inlays, fancy woods. That's generally how the rankings go. But within PRS, you've got your SE, which are their imports. Then you have your Core Series PRSs. Then you can step it up to something that they call a 10 top. The best of the best tops that they have. Then there's the Artist Package and the private stocks. I'm not as well versed in PRS, but private stock, think ultra custom shop, special run, custom order type deals. There's some really special ones out there. And of course they do the intricate dragons and stuff as well. But I bring that up because Wood Library is not private stock. It might be private stock like, but you're not stepped up to the very top of the bracket. There's actually a place in the PRS factory where they store woods that dealers have the opportunity to go there and change out the specs of common models. For example, today we're looking at a double cut 594. A dealer was allowed to visit that Wood Library, pick out what they wanted, and choose to swap out specs that the guitar doesn't normally have. So essentially, it's a way for dealers to create their own custom runs. So what makes this one special? First, we have what is considered the black gold wrap finish with a quilted maple top. Now, that's not necessarily uncommon to find on PRS guitars, but they specifically chose this top, and it is pretty nice. But here's the really big kicker on this one. If you notice, the back of the headstock said for the USA only. If you find that on a PRS, that means it has a Brazilian rosewood fretboard. Brazilian rosewood that was harvested before June of 1992 can be used by these companies because at that time it was only listed as a protected species rather than an endangered species. To ship it overseas, you have to have a special CITES export permit that they do not include with these, even though technically you could get one, you just have to jump through other steps. PRS apparently just doesn't want to deal with that. Now, what's the big deal with Brazilian rosewood? It just comes down to that was the rosewood that was used in the 50s, and it's now endangered. Most large corporations are not allowed to buy it. However, if you're a small builder, yeah, it's out there. You can get it, but it's special when a high-end brand does it. But the wood library, they're marked the exact same way as far as their lineups go, so you can get a 10 top or a non-10 top, but this one is. How do you know if you have one? Look at your serial number. If you have a little 10 up here on the corner, that's how you know you got one of those. But just to further put on to this point, like if the dealer wanted to, they could have chose a Carina back and neck or had a rosewood neck thrown on this that you don't normally have. But it seems like they'd left it pretty tried and true with a mahogany neck, mahogany back, and the quilty top. They just wanted the really special fretboard without getting too crazy. Although it looks like we might have a rosewood head cap veneer that's done up in satin. I'm not sure if that's special or not. Let's see what kind of case candy we get. Looks like a truss rod tool and wrench. Warning sheet to dealers and private users, as we talked about. And it looks like we get a sticker. A really nice leather strap with the matching birds as our inlays have. I like how this kind of matches the case with the whole brown and dark brown vibes. And some case keys, an operational guide, warranty info, thank you and welcome to PRS pamphlet. This is kind of cool. Apparently they make a donation on all Brazilian rosewood proceed guitars. And then this is nice. It's actually a spec sheet for your guitar, which will help us over there on the workbench. But before we throw this one on the workbench, I've got a couple of other humorous tales to share if you're interested. Otherwise, you can skip to this timestamp to get on with the show. So you might have been noticed, David's name has been popping up. He's been buying a lot of guitars through me. The story with him is he's currently deployed within the U.S. services, but he still has gas, gear acquisition syndrome. So instead of just sending the guitars directly to his parents, he wants to see them, experience them, since it might be a little bit before he can get to. So he's been forwarding them to me so I can document them for him and then send it on to his parents to wait. And he's been buying some really cool guitars. So for the time being, if anybody else is interested in a similar situation via my forwarding service on used instruments, you can find more information out on my website. Usually a video is not included within my forwarding service, but for a limited period of time, since I'm not entirely buried in reviews right now, I will include that for forwarding services within the USA. International, we can talk about it. There's another kind of funny story here. The seller of this one, Clay, David purchased it off of him on Reverb. He got all sketched out because he saw David had his account listed in a completely different state far away from mine. And then it's shipping here, but then he saw the Trogly's Guitar Show name. So he reaches out to me and he says, "Hey, Trogly, is this a scam? This is the first time I've ever sold something so expensive on Reverb. I'm a little bit weirded out by this name and address mix match." To which I had to say, nah, it's fine. I'm just forwarding it to his parents. But now let's get on to our specs. I couldn't resist polishing the top on this one. Now it's gonna dance in the light, but let's check out our electronics. So you might not have noticed this at first, but the pickups actually have their model name on the cover. Gotta get it in the light just right. It's the 5815 LT. But where's that on the bridge pickup? It's upside down right here. You'll also notice that the pickup covers have that brushed look to them. Here's what the backside of those look like. They also mark them there in a sticker. I do find it interesting that the pickups have two different leads coming out of them, kind of a cheaper looking one and then the standard braided. As far as our controls, it appears one of them does come up. Oh, nope, I'm a Dumbo. This one does come up too. Bridge position at 7.71, and then the neck, 7.69. Middle reads 3.85k ohms, so let's see what happens when we pull the knob. 471 in the neck. That's definitely reading like it's just taking some of the windings out, not a whole coil, which will give you this difference in reading for your bridge. And here's our neck pickup cavity. Looks kind of messy in there, in comparison to our bridge pickup cavity anyway. Mainly because we're seeing the straight up maple body versus the neck tenon going in here, which is a long one, and some areas having finish and not. But I did find this pretty interesting. It appears that they actually mark the dealer who did it. So this one was custom ordered by Wildwood and was completed in late 2017. But now we need to look at that bridge and tailpiece. The bridge is kind of like a modified ABR1, but has these giant brass blocks. No markings on the back. But it's got giant thumb wheels so you can easily get to them. and that is mounted directly into the body, just like an ABR one without any bushings. But I've always been a fan of these tailpieces. Normally, you have your posts, and then you put your tailpiece on it. This tailpiece is not designed the exact same way. You're supposed to just put it on, and then just like Frankenstein's monster, you gotta bolt it on, decked to the body, because that's just how it secures. You can't actually adjust the height of this. It is designed to be all the way down, and that's how most people like it anyways. They say it gives them better sustain. But then you've got these slits in the top that your strings go into, and then you pull it into the side portion where it holds it into place. So it just makes the restringing process a little bit easier, less prone to scratches. But naturally, this is a used guitar. It does have a few light signs of wear. For example, David, there is a ding impression right here by the picking area. Another pin-sized ding right here, kind of by the tailpiece, as well as some slightly deeper scuffs/scratches, and some other polishing swirls and scratches. That's another reason I decided to polish it up, to see how much of those would come off. But what's really cool about this body shape is it has a drastic carve to it. You see the light reflecting here? That's because it swoops down, then goes up, and then makes kind of another violin carve. Just watch the light reflect off the body. They do a lot of carving to these. It's kind of cool to appreciate in person. Then, of course, the extended cutaway right here that PRS likes to do. If you blast it with the light, you can see where the maple top stops and the mahogany body starts. And this does not actually have binding. This is just the maple cap exposed on the edge. But it sure does look like binding. But I'm glad I looked over here because there is a small chip in the finish. Must have been somebody's bracelet or something. Moving on from our quilt maple top and mahogany body, we've got that mahogany neck with Brazilian rosewood fretboard. We'll take a second to appreciate the Brazilian rosewood. It's got very even wood grain throughout, super straight. Now, does Brazilian make your guitar sound better? In my opinion, I think it's just because you want it to be as close to a 50s guitar as possible. I'm not convinced anything further than, it's just part of history, and that does make it really cool and usually collectible and valuable. So I understand it totally from that standpoint, but if you're just a player, don't waste your money. I did not notice this when I unboxed it. We actually have two different material inlays on this. It appears to just be two different pieces of mother of pearl, but you kind of get a bird within a bird, so they will reflect light in different ways. Gives it an interesting effect. There we go. That's our scale length, 24.594. With a nut width of 1.69 inches, increasing to 2.09 by the 12th. They call this a pattern vintage neck, measuring 0.89 at the 1st fret neck depth, and 0.99 by the 12th. Here's a look at that neck profile, 1st fret and 12th fret. Nearly U-shaped by the look of things. It starts off what I would just kind of consider medium rounded territory. And yeah, it does kind of chunk up, but you start to hit this heel around the 12th fret, making it seem a lot chunkier than it is for the majority of the playing section until you get to your solo section. Then you get your giant PRS heel that just really chunks it up. I'm not sure shredders would like this guitar. Here's our headstock veneer. It's just a satin wood look, but our truss rod's in good shape. Here's our cover, reading McCarty 594. It's actually got a decent thickness to it and appears to be made out of some sort of metal. It has that similar brushed look to it. Then you've got this interesting combination gold and chrome locking tuner system. That is a running theme. Our pull pieces are gold, the covers are the more chrome color. Gold, chrome, gold, chrome. Now that I've strung it up, there's a few things I want to make mention of. At first I was like, I don't know if I like this whole satin raw feel of the headstock, but now I do, because when you're changing strings, sometimes careless techs will scratch up your headstock if they leave a string long or something. This kind of helps fight against that, and if you were to leave a tuner on here and it were to discolor the finish, the headstock would look weird. This will not be as affected by that, so that's kind of cool. And then the tuner tips have this kind of matted look to it. I've noticed that fingerprints don't show on it, so that's actually kind of a cool OCD type thing. The pickup covers don't have exactly the same effect, but it's similar with that whole brushed look. But I did want to point out the pickup rings because I forgot to earlier. They're nice and rounded, and your height adjustment is actually recessed inside of it, so it doesn't stick up as much as on other humbuckers. So if you're a wild man with your picking and you've ever cut yourself on that, maybe you would like a PRS's design. And now we move on to the backside. Somebody definitely enjoyed playing it. It's got lots of surface scratches. Now could the right guy buff those out with a wheel, probably. But there is an impression on the back of the body right there. And then a couple of other dings where there's some like lacquer delamination. But the finish is such a nice dark red color. It's hard to see the figuring of the body, but there is a little bit there. Now our control cavity. So this answers some questions. The braided portion is installed like usual, but I was questioning what these weird white things were. I think this is how they're getting their special tones here. The white ones go to the push-pull pot. Kind of similar to 4-conductor wiring, but I think this would technically be 3-conductor. But then we do have these capacitors also linked to the push-pull pot, so that might be part of the special sauce to these. Maybe not the cleanest routes we've ever seen from PRS on these. There's some wood splinters in here. Here's a look at the toggle switch cavity route. Kind of an interesting cat eye type thing. We've got our combo output jack plate, low profile strap buttons, one at the bottom and one at the top. And then we can see the faux binding on the body, but we do have real binding on the neck. I wanted to point that out. Other than that, just our typical PRS stuff back here. Custom built for USA only, 2017 10 top with our open back tuners. But all put back together, this one weighs just a hair over 8 pounds. So let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear the tones. I really like this PRS strap. It's nice and wide. Even though this is 8 pounds, it feels like it's 5 or 6. That's the difference a nice thick strap will make for you. About you guys, but I really love the clean tones on this guitar. Very full and round. Almost has a piezo-like element to it. Wow, this thing's actually quite nice. I like the way it sounds. At first I thought the action was a little bit too high, but with the height of the frets, it honestly works pretty well. I found very usable tones out of this, so if you enjoyed what you heard, maybe try a PRS out. I was a little bit unsure about this neck profile at first, but you know, once you start playing, it just kind of fits like a glove. They've got something going on here. I was very pleased with this. The only thing I'm not the biggest fan of on this one is this falls into what most quilt tops end up looking like in person. They're awesome, right? But there's not a lot of movement to this top, unfortunately. That's why when we reviewed that Les Paul Ultima, I was like, this is a crazy quilt top. It's got so much movement. This is kind of that phenomenon I was talking about, but it's still a beautiful guitar and it sounds great. I could see why this one was played as much as it was. David, thank you for sharing some more guitars with us. And viewers, I hope you enjoy your new guitar knowledge. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day. And you might even enjoy this next one.